All right, welcome everyone to the fourth installment of Building a Resilient Food Culture, Lessons from the Pandemic, Public Policies and Legislative Priorities. My name is Adam Morgan. I am the Advocacy Coordinator for Greater Pittsburgh Community Food Bank. We have a great panel and discussion lined up for today, so I will start with a few housekeeping items and then we'll get right to it. This webinar today is being recorded and will be sent out to all registrants in the coming days. If you'd like to watch any of the previous sessions of the series, you can find them on Food 21's website under resources. We will show that link at the end of our session today. Feel free to submit questions or comments throughout the session as the panelists are speaking, and we will reserve the last 10 or 15 minutes to address those questions and comments. So again, thank you all for joining us today. We'll be speaking with Pennsylvania's Secretary of the Department of Agriculture, Russell Redding. He is the Commonwealth's 26th Secretary of Agriculture since joining Governor Wolf's administration in 2015. We have Ellen Bollinger coming to us from Washington, D.C., where she is the Legal Director for the Food Research and Action Center, or FRAC. She knows more about the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program than anyone I think I've ever met, and she'll be giving us an idea of what to expect at the federal level with a new administration, a new Congress, and a new year. We have State Representative Austin Davis, who was recently reelected to his second term in Harrisburg from the 35th Legislative District and is serving as the chairman for the Allegheny County House Democratic Delegation. He actually represents the food bank's headquarters in Duquesne, and we're very happy to have such a strong advocate representing us in Harrisburg. Finally, we'll be speaking to Dawn Plummer, who has been the Executive Director of the Pittsburgh Food Policy Council for the past 6 years, and has worked for the past 19 years on issues of food systems, as well as economic, social, and racial inequality. So, Secretary Redding, let's start with you. Can you give us a sense of how the work of the department and the industry of agriculture in Pennsylvania has changed in the wake of the pandemic?
Yeah, Adam, good afternoon, and to each of the panelists, I'm very honored to join you. It's good to see you. It's good to hear you. Representative Davis, congratulations to you in the reelection as well. Look forward to a productive session in the days and months ahead. I'm really just honored to be with you and having opportunity to share some thoughts about building that resilient food culture that you speak of, and certainly sharing some of the lessons learned from this pandemic on Pennsylvania agriculture and our charitable food system. There is much I can say. There's nothing more important than a simple thank you to the Greater Pittsburgh Community Food Bank and quite frankly, all of the charitable food system network across the state and the volunteers who've just been extraordinary over the last 10 months in the response to COVID. So thank you for that. What we all witnessed out in Pittsburgh with the long lines of cars and food boxes that made the national news. Suddenly, the invisible food insecure were revealed, and that was a wake-up call, I think, to all of us across the nation about just how significant the impact of COVID was and how important it was to have both a state and national response to that. By the way, I just want to say congratulations to Lisa Scales for her Pittsburgher of the Year award. Congratulations, Lisa. Thank you. I think for all of us, we also were reminded over the last 10 months of agriculture's role in state and national security. And certainly maintaining access to food is foundational to that security and a civil society. COVID has revealed many things, some good, some not, but certainly we witnessed a greater awareness of food, the supply, access, who's growing it, the number of people who are food insecure, the complexities of our marketplace and the distribution of that product, equally how fragile the farm economy was and continues to be but also on the good side, the level of creativity that was exhibited by many to problem solve, again, I think stands out for me as one of the hallmarks of this pandemic. It's important to not lose sight of these issues because unfortunately the need is still elevated for food assistance, and that concern has not been abated at this point. Just last month, for example, food banks in Pennsylvania and their partners served about 74,000 people a day. Put that in perspective, that is roughly the equivalent of Scranton, Pennsylvania, home of now President Biden, as we know. Feeding America, as we've heard in their map, the meal gap showed that about 11% of Pennsylvanians were food insecure pre-pandemic. That's grown to 15% in 2020. Again, in just hard numbers, that's about 2 million people in Pennsylvania who are still food insecure. These numbers, I think, go to the heart of the topic of building a resilient food culture. And I'm hopeful that society never looks at the food system the same after what we have witnessed and experienced. Culture is defined as the customary beliefs, the social forms, the shared attitudes and values and practices that characterize an institution. Through this pandemic, our food culture is being redefined, and I believe that is a good thing. We now see the connections between our capacity to produce food and the ability to access it. We see the farmer and the food bank. We see the people that produce, process, package, distribute, stock, and serve, who were largely invisible before. But I recognize that cultures change slowly, but for all of us involved in the food system, we now are presented with a rare opportunity to help change this culture, because culture is informed by our experiences. And one of the most important experiences that I saw early on was the designation of agriculture as life-sustaining by Governor Wolf. And this designation could not be more accurate or more acutely understood than in times like this. This designation was a statement of value, but it was also, it set forth expectations, and with it came high responsibility to society. It became part of our culture. When many of the businesses were shut down, many people were under mandatory stay-at-home orders. Everyone involved in the food and agriculture industry in Pennsylvania was called upon as never before to help meet the goals of keeping people fed and keeping them safe. We also learned that early actions to grant administrative flexibility, secure waivers, and funding are critical. I give a lot of credit here to our director of the Bureau of Food Assistance, Karen Long Earl, who's joined us today, for the work that we've done. But important in that was making sure that we were taking advantage of all of the waivers that we needed to keep people fed, and that means making sure that our standard programs like the State Food Purchase Program and the Federal Emergency Food Assistance Program, the Commodity Supplemental Food Program, that we pushed the boundaries to make sure that the flexibility was there, the waivers were there. In what seemed like a new concept in March, where for social distancing, it became sort of a standard practice. We wanted to make sure that those pantries and the staff that were working at the time could do what they needed to do and complete the required paperwork, of course, at the same time limiting the personal interaction that was required prior to that. That all happened on Friday, March the 13th, at the very start of the pandemic. The following week, Pennsylvania began the process of securing the USDA waivers to implement the TFAP Disaster Household Distribution Program. Pennsylvania, I'm proud to say, was among one of the first to apply to implement this program, and one of the very first to be approved to implement that. That all came together at the end of March. This allowed our charitable food system to to work more efficiently and deal with the income verification paperwork that I mentioned. At the same time, protect everyone also. We successfully applied for USDA extensions to the disaster household distribution. That happened in the spring and continued through June. At the same time, we recognized that our statewide network of regional food banks was struggling to keep up with the demand of the issues of securing shelf-stable products, boxes to pack food in, and personal protective equipment. The state made available about $1 million to help them, and that was all made available through Hunger Free PA and the 18-member food banks as well. In addition, we recognize that the impact on schools, so securing with the governor and the First Lady and the Department of Education the waivers in the federal child nutrition program through the school year was critical. But as I say often, we also can't have a charitable food system without a food system that's charitable. So what we witnessed, and Adam, you mentioned the front side, this pandemic also dramatically upended our agricultural production and food supply chain like never before. And overnight, 100% of our purchases were being made at the grocers, leaving all of the agricultural producers and food manufacturers with disrupted markets. We saw the images of milk being dumped in the fields, the vegetables being plowed under, and that was devastating, and those effects remain when you have a state that 80% of our 52,000 farms are family operations that had a stinging impact on them. But luckily, we had a state program, the Pennsylvania Agricultural Surplus System, or PASS as we call it, available to us. It provides an alternative market for these products that may be in good times hard to market, but they're good quality, high quality products. We want to put those into the food system and not waste them. We were able to use that program. It pays the farmer or the processor for some of the fixed costs of packaging and distribution and such. Doesn't buy the product, but at least gives them some recovery costs. In May, pleased to note with Representative Davis's help, $25 million of the Federal CARES Act funding was dedicated to food. 15 million of that went to the state food purchase program to supplement the state appropriation of 18 million, and the other 10 million went to the PASS program. So through that and our work with Feeding Pennsylvania, who is our contractor on it, and Jane Clement Smith and Tom Manger and team do a phenomenal job. But we were able to pull in the meat and dairy products and protein and all that produce, 30 different farm producers and distributors, 67 counties benefited from it, 6 million pounds of product that was secured between July and December of this past year. Another program funded was the CARES Act. Through the CARES Act was the Fresh Food Financing Initiative. And this one was particularly important because one of the issues we stumbled into quickly were these gaps that had existed prior to the pandemic, but again, were amplified post-pandemic. Putting $10 million into that program, we funded 115 different projects. 13 of those were in Allegheny County. But what was particularly important is it acknowledged both the disproportionate impact of both COVID-19 and food apartheid on communities made up of Black, Indigenous, and people of color. But it also went directly to addressing some of those issues that we needed to address, just to make sure that every provider, every aspect of local food could be sourced and used to address the issues of hunger. Again, I just say that culture informed our experience. A couple of other points. I think building a resilient food culture requires capturing all of the lessons learned and using them to change the policies and practices at both the state and the federal level. Certainly, We'll hear more from Ellen, but just to say on the federal side, in the new administration, I think working to make permanent the improvements to SNAP benefit levels and rescind some of the harmful rules that undercut access to SNAP is important. Recommending improvements to the new programs like the Farmers to Families Food Box, so it benefits more farmers and recipients alike. Advocating for nationwide implementation of a program like the Fresh Food Financing Initiative that I just described, and championing direct support for farmers with an emphasis on particularly the broadband to allow for critical direct access consumer sales. At the state level, you will continue to see the Wolf administration being a champion for food and agriculture, and very much appreciate what the governor has done to date. As I say often, to have a chief executive who is a former Peace Corps volunteer who worked in India frontline on discovering sort of the power of food to change lives. That is a very treasured quality in a state executive, and to have that, Governor Wolf has shown through many times. We'll continue to support our farm bill, which has food assistance, but farm to school and meat processing, and certainly urban agriculture is part of that. So as I close, just to say, our culture was shaken, our culture will change. What we do in building that resilient food culture, I think, will be defined by the lessons of the last 10 months, but amplified by the work that's been done by Don Plummer and so many other people around the state. So as we look to that promise of the vaccine, we also look to the lessons learned to say important for us, both as a society to address those who are food insecure, but also acknowledge that we have an opportunity to connect as never before our food production system and those who are producing with those who are consuming. And that's exciting. It comes at a high price to us as a society, but I think making something good come of this crisis is what we owe it. So Adam, thank you, and I'm honored to be with you.
Thank you so much. That's interesting. I actually didn't know that Governor Wolf is a returned Peace Corps volunteer. I am also now served 2 terms in the Peace Corps, so that's very exciting. Thank you for your words. Several questions came in specific to Pennsylvania's agricultural system, so we'll get to those in a little bit.
Okay.
And thank you again. We'll turn to Ellen. Ellen, can you give us a sense of the federal landscape? We saw Congress pass 4 pieces of COVID relief legislation last year. How have those bills helped the food space, and what can we hope to see in this new year?
Yeah, no, thank you so much. And it's really such an honor to present with the secretary and the other panelists. And it's an honor to be with such great people who've been doing, all of you who are attending, who've been doing so much in the space to make people more food secure in Pennsylvania. There's a lot of leadership out of your state, but we know, had you not collectively been telling the story and lifting up the voices and the experiences of what people have been going through, it would have been so much more difficult to get any of the federal relief that's been provided so far. And we know that, as the secretary said, there's so much more that's needed from the federal government. Charity can't do it alone, states can't do it alone, and the scope and the scale of this is so huge. So we'll need your continued help from Food 21, Pitt Honors, and of course FRAC's longtime ally, Greater Pittsburgh Community Food Bank. It is a new day in terms of Washington. You can think about it as a federal government that's been willing to do some things, it's been willing to use some of the tools in the toolbox, but it hasn't been willing to use all the tools in the toolbox and to the degree that they're needed to be used. And so we enter a period where there's quite a bit of opportunity. Things don't happen automatically. You can think of the current relief that's going on, that will continue at least during the pandemic, and some of it is aimed to sunset in June, but there'll be efforts to continue it further. The secretary mentioned on SNAP, of course, that Pennsylvania has done an excellent job so far of getting the federal relief that's been approved. You've brought all households up to the maximum SNAP benefit level. Pennsylvania sought to do more than that, but was blocked by the Trump administration. In the December relief package that was passed, Pennsylvania is now able to get additional relief even to households that were already at the maximum benefit level. a 15% boost beyond what people have been getting. And that will last January through June. The Biden administration has announced its intention to keep that going for longer. We don't know quite yet how that will get passed, but that's important relief. In addition, in that December package, there were improvements, some of which will come and allow DHS, which has already been doing a good job at SNAP administration. There's going to be more money going to states for administration of SNAP, and we know that's important. No longer will the receipt of pandemic unemployment compensation count against SNAP benefits or against SNAP eligibility for benefits. That again is also important from December. But what's up ahead? What's up ahead in the package that the Biden administration has already put forth and talked about is again making the duration of SNAP benefit boost much longer. I appreciated the secretary saying permanent. We agree that SNAP benefits were underfunded before the pandemic hit, and now, of course, need is much more acute. But on a permanent basis, SNAP benefits need to be made more adequate. There are a couple of different pathways where this may happen. One to keep your eye on is the budget process. There's discussion of using a fast track budget reconciliation process so that things can move in the Senate with only 50 votes. If the majority, which the Democrats have, if they hold their 50 votes, then they would be able to break the tie with the vice president breaking the tie and pass things with 51 votes. We know many things take 60 votes to get done in the Senate, and some of the things they will seek to do will be done under regular order, under bipartisan cooperation. Some of the things, though, may get fast-tracked on a more partisan basis under budget reconciliation. Regardless of the vehicle, the important thing to keep your eye on is continue, please, to help the country understand and your lawmakers understand in Washington what people are going through, what you're seeing in real time. You don't need to be experts on which legislative vehicle it is. You don't really need to be an expert on the rules, but federal policymakers need your expertise on what you're confronting on the ground, what people need, and keep your messages, I would say, always about hungry people, what they're up against, the disparities you're seeing in the community. We know there have always been some disparities in particular groups hardest hit. COVID has exacerbated those. Be sure to lift up that message. Coming behind these relief packages that Congress will be looking to do, and there probably will be multiple of them during this year, there are regular policy opportunities for improving the nutrition landscape, one of which is reauthorization of the child nutrition programs. The secretary mentioned how important the school meals programs had been. These programs get reauthorized about every 5 years. This reauthorization is overdue. It was last reauthorized in 2010. So that is a big opportunity on all of the child nutrition program area. The other one that's coming up on, and it's not that far ahead, is the 2023 Farm Bill. And believe it or not, people will already start planning for the reauthorization of that. And I'm sure the Secretary's department will have a lot of ideas, as well as your DHS, for what would work best in Pennsylvania. I'm going to put into the chat box a link to the transition priorities that FRAC made to the incoming Biden administration, because it lays out on the administrative side things that we think the new administration can do, particularly at USDA, to make it easier for people to access SNAP, easier for them to use SNAP, and more adequate benefits for people, and what we'd like to see on the child nutrition side to improve the safety net for people. We also, of course, in that document talk about things that would be done more legislatively, but that will give you a rough menu of some of the top line things that we think the country needs. And of course, bottom line, food security really can't be solved without a healthier economy. We need an economy that works for everybody. We need to get economic growth up, and we need to see there be stronger wages. So there are things that can get done within the narrower nutrition space, but to have an equitable, strong recovery and something that would really help us as a country on hunger overall, we need a much stronger economy. So with that, I will turn the program back.
Thank you so much, Ellen. And I can tell you, last time, I think it was in December when we spoke with Congressman Glenn Thompson, ranking member on the Minority House Agriculture Committee. He also mentioned already holding listening sessions for the 2023 Farm Bill. So it, maybe 2 years away, but yeah, the work is definitely started already. Thank you again for sharing. Now we'll turn to Representative Davis. You've been in Harrisburg for a little while now. Just how different was 2020 in Harrisburg? What has the pandemic been like through your work there, but also for your district?
Yeah, well, first, thanks for the question, and thanks to the other panelists who are here. 2020 has certainly been like no other year that I've served in the legislature, but I think it's been like no other year that any member has served in the legislature. It was a year that was fraught with significant challenges, both on the political, but as well on the fronts here at home in our districts and for the people that we represent. We did take some significant actions in the legislature that I think helped people, particularly as it relates to food. Secretary Redding highlighted some of those things, but for example, the Emergency Food Assistance Program was made more flexible, so those seeking assistance didn't have to go through cumbersome paperwork such as income verifications to prove their eligibility. In addition, the state food purchase program could operate without income eligibility requirements. So those were just a few things that we addressed. Additionally, working with the governor to plug more coronavirus money into CARES Act funding to help bring down some of the administrative costs that organizations are struggling with. But this was just the beginning. There's going to be a long road to recovery, and there's still a lot of work to be done to make sure that we are meeting the needs of our constituents. One of the earlier speakers had mentioned that there's going to be a number of relief bills probably that are going to get passed this year. I certainly agree with that sentiment. I think as we begin a new session, it's going to be important for legislators and elected officials, both at the state and federal level, to really focus on the reasons that have caused increased food insecurity, such as adding limiting the difficulty in accessing aid programs, helping address isolation issues, particularly that older adults are facing, as well as addressing supply chain issues. The food supply chain is struggling to balance supply and demand challenges that arise with the shifting marketplace, resulting in supply challenges for grocery stores and charitable food systems. We also have to address some of the socioeconomic problems that many of our communities are facing, a combination of social, financial, educational, and geographic barriers that make it harder than usual to access those who are food insecure to access food. I represent many food insecure areas like Clairton and Duquesne in the Mon Valley area, and I've seen firsthand from constituents the struggle that goes into accessing food. One of the most rewarding things that I did in 2020 was partner with you guys, the Greater Pittsburgh Food Bank, for our turkey distribution at Thanksgiving. We gave out over 1,000 turkeys that day, and really almost shut down the city of McKeesport, but it really highlighted the need of folks that are struggling. But I think 2020 was certainly a challenging year. I think we are in 2021. I think it's going to be equally as challenging in a different way as we try to pull ourselves out of this pandemic, but also meet the needs of many folks that are struggling. There's a lot of work to be done. I think we as legislators and the governor's office are going to be working on the budget. The governor's given his budget address February 2nd. That is going to lead to some other significant challenges to meeting the needs that are already there. We have a very precarious financial situation here in the Commonwealth, and it's going to take real leadership to address these challenges. So I look forward to the road ahead to see what 2021 brings, but I think it will be equally as challenging for elected officials as 2020 was. So I appreciate you guys having me here, and I look forward to our discussion.
Great, Representative. Thank you so much. Finally, we will turn to Dawn Plummer from the Food Policy Council. So, how has the council been working through this pandemic? And yeah, can you give the local perspective to this conversation.
Sure. Thank you so much, Adam. And thank you to all of you for joining me and inviting me to participate in this important discussion. I have some slides to share, but I wanted to just start by, especially thanking Dennis McManus, who's our co-chair of our steering committee for the Pittsburgh Food Policy Council, and others for the invitation. I have, let's see if I can share my slides here. Just wanted to demonstrate a bit of, and Adam, is that coming through okay?
Yep, looks good.
Okay, great. I wanted to share, building on what has been discussed previously, we have been on the ground throughout our council. Our member network has been, advocating for many of the policies and changes and adjustments and responses that we've needed to see at the state and federal level. And so we've been very active there at the local level, also making sure that our community gardens and farmers markets are seen as not just recreation points, but as vital food access points as well. And also expanding urban agriculture in this time and things like that at the local level. I wanted to share just a little bit about the Food Policy Council and what we've been up to in recent years, and kind of where we have built things to be today. And first, I think it's really important to kind of underscore the role of public policy actually. In this conversation, I'm really excited that there was a conversation around policy in regards to the food system, because partially what we see as our role at the Pittsburgh Food Policy Council is really building out a regional mechanism for food democracy. How do we connect people to the rules and decisions and regulations that really shape our food system? And how do we engage people in helping to formulate and lead change that really address some of the root challenges and failures of that system, and lift up some of the real opportunities and assets that we do have. So, if food is indeed a human right and a basic need, the role of government and the role of policymaking is critical to that. So the Food Policy Council has been around since 2009, and our mission is to build a food system that benefits our communities, economy, and environment in ways that are just, equitable, and sustainable. And we bring together a network of over 100 member entities and individuals who, come together to really reimagine our region's food system, seeking both policies and practices that promote all the good things we want to see: local food growing, sustainable agriculture, equitable development, and access to healthy food, particularly in low-income communities. So I wanted to really point to our Greater Pittsburgh Food Action Plan project. We've been working on our region's first comprehensive food system plan for the last over 2 years. And so we actually released the plan in October. We're finalizing it when COVID hit, and spent some time really digging in and prioritizing. In that plan, you'll find, and it's available for download, 150 different strategies outlined there. And we had to really, in reflection on both the, the pandemic and the public health crisis, as well as the, unfolding economic implications of the pandemic, as well as rising racial inequality, we really wanted to look at our priorities and lift up ones that needed to be immediately addressed. So just to share a little bit about that food action planning process, it's been a robust engagement of stakeholders, communities, residents, public officials, and business owners and farmers across the region in the development of the plan that we have. So back to the point of, really trying to create a way to really engage those of us who come to the food system from different points of view, a way to be able to have collective impact together. So really pulling from some conversations with municipalities, from research and community conversations and surveys, et cetera, to put together our final plan. So I wanted to share our priorities here in terms of, looking forward to 2021. We've outlined the following 9 priorities, and many of these do have public policy implications. And so when we're looking at things like land access for farming, when we're looking at affordable public transportation, looking at government anti-hunger programs like we've been discussing this morning, support for food entrepreneurs, particularly women, immigrants, and people of color and other marginalized communities. Also lifting up, how do we support life-sustaining, as described by Governor Wolf, life-sustaining essential food systems workers. Many of the challenges we're seeing, there were cracks in that foundation well before the pandemic. How do we leverage institutional policy, so purchasing power of large institutions to support our regional food economy? And also, how do we build out our food system? We think about roads and bridges as critical infrastructure. Well, we have critical infrastructure of our food system that we've seen break down. And how do we build up that infrastructure to support a vibrant food economy and healthy communities? So this is a robust agenda that we will be pursuing. And I wanted to share a little bit about the how we will be pursuing it. We're in the process of, since the release of the plan, of really working through an implementation strategy. And we will be launching a campaign here in the coming months that will really push out these priorities and engage a broad cross-section of our membership and communities in the region. But there's some really key components that I wanted to lift up in terms of how do we get this kind of policy agenda done at the regional level? Because we can't just be sort of the heads of nonprofits, having meetings and advocating. This really needs to be a grassroots mobilization, not only of residents, but of our elected officials, our business leaders, and others. So the implementation of our ambitious plan will require shared leadership. So not a centralized leadership, but how do we actually bring our region's leaders of businesses, nonprofits, and communities, as well as our public sector leaders to the table to guide the implementation of the plan. How do we identify champions? So again, champions from all of those sectors, especially listening to those community members who have been most impacted by the failures of our food system, or the injustice of our food system, or the lack of sustainability that we currently have. How do we build out communication and coordination? We're excited to be able to launch a membership hub for our members to really deeply collaborate. In this virtual reality, it becomes even more imperative that we share information and have clear communication. And then collective action. How do we mobilize our networks? How do we mobilize our members and friends of our membership in the council and our communities across the region for collective action needed to advance the priorities of our plan. And we also, of course, need a comprehensive policy agenda. So that policy agenda will take shape in terms of institutional policies, of local, city and county policies, state and federal. So how do we really draw on the rich advocacy resources we have, in our partners like the Greater Pittsburgh Community Food Bank and Just Harvest and others who, really lead the charge on particularly anti-hunger policy, for example, and how do we mobilize an even bigger group of folks to get to learn about these policies and get engaged. And then lastly, the idea of data collection and monitoring. Really in the plan, we set out evaluation measures of the various strategies. How do we know when we're doing, what we set out to do? And how do we, communicate that with the broader public? And so that's through data collection and monitoring. So that's a little bit of an overview. I could go into more depth, but I wanted to make sure to leave some time for discussion. Thank you again for the invitation to join the conversation. And I did want to say, if you're not a member of the Food Policy Council, you can join us at our website and also take a look at that food action plan. I can drop it in the chat. But thank you so much. Look forward to the conversation.
Yeah, thanks, Dawn. And I love your list of priorities. I think too many food plans or policies tend to get siloed, within entities or agencies. And I think your list of priorities really shows the, multi-dimensional aspect of the food space and the food system. So I first wanted to ask, I don't know if this would be better for Secretary Redding or Representative Davis, but I recently saw that Governor Wolf announced his desire to take some money from the state insurance fund to create a new grant program to help struggling businesses and firms. And I was just wondering if either of you could give us some insight on that plan, kind of how it will be targeted and what the challenges would be in getting that going in 2021.
Well, I mean, I can certainly speak to the legislative side. I think they're legislatively, we need to take action to help the governor do that. We are in session in the next 2 weeks. This upcoming Monday is our first day back. I hope, obviously, that my party does not control the legislative chamber. I hope that the Republicans will see the value in helping small businesses during this pandemic, given some of the actions that they've taken last year. This seems like an easy way an easy way with funds that we have to drive dollars out quickly to provide aid. So I'm hopeful. I'm not sure because we don't control the calendar on whether they're going to bring it up or not. But I think it's a good plan by the governor, and I think it's targeted. I think it makes a lot of sense. And so I'm hopeful, and I stand ready to work with my colleagues to deliver on that in the coming weeks.
Yeah, Representative, yes. Yeah, I'd just add, I mean, clearly, the economic impact is far and deep in the business community. We've heard that certainly in the restaurants. Restaurants are included as part of the small businesses, and we all know firsthand sort of what we see in our local communities of economic impact for them. So the governor hears that, he recognized that. It's $145 million. It won't cover all bases, but I think what the governor was hoping to do was to at least put some resources out there that acknowledge the need that was there. I don't have in front of me, Adam, sort of what's the sort of conditions are and some of the guideline components, so we can certainly provide that to you. But top line is at least acknowledging that there's pain there. Let's try to help those small businesses, particularly the restaurants, until we find additional resources through the budgeting process or federal stimulus money becomes available.
Secretary Reddy, I'm going to turn to the questions that are coming in. I'm going to start with you. Someone asked, is there a way to substantially increase the amount of local produce and proteins, grown and made here in Pennsylvania, so we don't find ourselves facing the types of supply chain disruptions in the global supply chain?
Yeah, it's a great question, and the short answer is yes. But as we've also discovered, it's complicated, right? Because of supply chains and sourcing, and even as simple as, is there enough processing? In that, I'll just point to on the meat processing side, the answer is no. But the Farm Bill in our small meat processing grants at least addressed 15 additional processors to become compliant with the federal food safety requirements and or expansions. So I think there's opportunity there to build protein sector, but produce as well, all of the components of our food system, and to change this dynamic locally. As proud as I am of the charitable food network, I think to Dawn's point is there's a more important and systemic question about just sort of building that resiliency and capacity well beyond the charitable and emergency response network, right? And that's where you need to make those investments that the Food Policy Council and others have advocated for. Quite frankly, I see that as the next 2 years' work with the Biden administration, but also the Wolf administration, and picking up on the recommendation, but also picking up on the practical experiences we've had the last 10 months of how do you build that network of both supply and demand, and recognize that also has to be an economic enterprise, right? It can't all be charitable. So that's part of the challenge, but one that I think we have to address to get at those issues that we've noted today and are part of this conversation. But it's also things beyond food that have been mentioned, like a minimum wage, being able to change the basic habit of where people source, what people source, and providing those opportunities that are only possible if there's economic capacity by individuals and communities to do so.
Absolutely. Ellen, a question came in about the Farm to Families program, the Coronavirus Food Assistance Program that we saw rolled out last year by USDA. I was wondering if you had any insight on that program, and the question is, what sort of improvements would we like to see within that program?
Yeah, so we very much at FRAC rely on Feeding America for its insights. And of course, they're getting their insights from people like the food bank in Pittsburgh and others around the country to help us understand how things could work better. I do think that the team that's coming in at USDA is a pretty experienced and thoughtful team, and I would expect them to work very closely with your state on how could that be improved. And frankly, the secretary probably has greater insights on that than I would. You know, it is going to be an important aspect of the relief, and we know that the you know, to the prior question about the supply chain and disruptions, that this has been, you know, a tall order, and there have been some things the federal government's done well, and some things that perhaps were not done in the best way. And but I think the importance of where that fits within the scope of relief, knowing, as the secretary mentioned, we've got to do something about the overall economy and wages. But of course, there's absolutely an important role for the emergency feeding programs going forward.
And if I could just add, I mean, we have made a set of recommendations to the USDA, and we'll reissue those. We did that under Secretary Perdue. We'll do it again to Secretary Vilsack. That's a compilation of suggestions and thoughts from all of the northeastern states, plus some others who wanted to join in to that conversation. But I think two key points. One is the family farmers to the family food box. I was personally pleased to see the USDA access the Commodity Credit Corporation to do that. So that is a new twist, and I think the Biden administration will certainly continue. There are recommendations, however, that we hope are addressed. Two in particular. One is, I think it was a missed moment to address the opportunities for local sourcing. Right. So as an example, the states were not consulted on any of the sourcing, whether we had farmers who want to participate, whether we had processors. We knew we had the need, but there's a really good example. So it was managed at a macro level, when I think if you want to go to the heart of some of the questions raised here about how do you build some of that capacity, so you have to recognize that there are people here who can deliver that, right? And then use them in satisfying that need for food and nutrition. And two is the recognized cost and using the TFAP model that's been well adopted as a way to help with the administrative costs for delivery, the last mile cost, as just one example. So, but I am hopeful that the program continues, but I'm also hopeful that it gets a local feel, that we can make some connections that I think go to, you know, part of this culture change, and that is to recognize that there are some wonderful foods locally. We just have to work hard to make the connection, and we have to validate them by recognizing that they are good foods, you know, and that we want that as a principle of our food system. So yeah, much to do, but thank you for the question.
Great, thank you. Representative Davis, this question kind of gets to the point I made about food policy or systems often being siloed. The question is, one of the challenges in getting different departments and layers of government to work more effectively together to resolve these food system issues. You know, being a representative, you know, being one of many in the General Assembly and being on many different committees, what do you see as possible in this effort to coordinate resources to move together forward?
Well, you know, I think one, it's going to take a mindset shift in the Pennsylvania House or in the Pennsylvania General Assembly period. I think oftentimes I see many of my colleagues on the other side of the aisle seek to enact means testing for different programs, or a number of different barriers that create barriers of access for programs, and also creates cumbersome regulation for the department to then administer when they're administering the program. I think a lot of that contributes to the difficulty and the effectiveness of some of our programs in Pennsylvania, in the Commonwealth. So, for example, if we have a program, that we know it provides is 90% effective, and there's like a 5% fraud rate, right? Many of my colleagues will focus on the 5% fraud rate and not the 90% that the program's serving. So you're really making it, you're making it harder for the 5%, for the 5%, but you're also making it significantly difficult for the 90% of people who are benefiting from the program. And I think it really is going to require a shift in the way elected officials at the state capitol think, and the way that we're trying to drive out services. I think the biggest barrier that we addressed early on was some of the just cumbersome regulations that were on the books that were hampering driving out resources quickly to people who need it. If there's one takeaway from this pandemic, I hope that that my colleagues think about that when they're introducing amendments and bills, that we really need to be more focused on the people who need this, and not focused on the 2 or 3% that are going to take advantage of the program. Because the reality is there's always going to be that 2 or 3%, no matter what you do. It's our jobs to try to make sure we're helping the people that need help.
I would just
Absolutely.
add to that point, if I could, Adam, that thank you
Mhm.
to everybody on this call who worked so hard on the last farm bill and on the fight against some regulations the Trump administration had tried to put into place in SNAP that would make it even worse than what the representative just described in terms of lack of flexibility. And Pennsylvania generated a lot of the public comments that stopped some of the changes that would have been so terrible. Two of those rulemakings the Trump administration withdrew before it left office. And so, hopefully we're going to go in the direction that the representative just talked about, and have a better program. But thanks to everybody who held off some of the things that would have kept SNAP from responding as well as it is right now.
Yeah, if I may also sort of jump in here, I wanted to share, recently I was talking with a steering committee member of ours, Chef Carlos Thomas, who recently joined our steering committee. He runs an organization called Feed the Hood and owns Confluence Catering. But he said to me, we don't have a food insecurity problem, we have a food systems problem, which I just thought was a really profound remark, because it's true. We have, we know we have, so much of our food is wasted. We have an abundant amount of food in our country, and does it reach, where it's needed is really the question. So, as any system requires, really clear communication and coordination, that's really a role that food policy councils can help to play. We have many strong actors across our food system, and we've seen in other states when, talking about state coordination of resources in particular, many states have, decided to implement state food policy councils to help coordinate both within state government resources and with partners, farmers, businesses, charitable food, and others, and growers across a state. So, we had been working together with the secretary and his office and others to think about what a state food policy council could look like in Pennsylvania. Unfortunately, that work didn't come to fruition before the pandemic, but I think we really see, I frequently was kicking myself like, if we would have gotten that off the ground, I think it could have really helped with our coordination and communication. Though, of course, did a fabulous job without it, but it could really be another tool. And I just wanted to share that.
Great. Thank you, Dawn. Sophia asks, I guess this to everyone, there's a lot of mention of upcoming plans and announcements. What are the platforms or recommended sources to keep up to date on those types of updates?
Well, just from my perspective, I think, social media is a great one. If you follow Pennsylvania House Democrats, me individually, as well as the governor, every announcement that we make usually ends up there. And I'm sure Secretary Redding has some social media accounts for the Department of Agriculture and himself as well. But those are always really good places for quick announcements. But that's just my suggestion.
Okay, and then also, I'm just going to go ahead and share my screen. I shared some links that people can follow or go to get involved with advocacy. Just the food bank FRAC, Feeding America, Feeding Pennsylvania, and then the Pittsburgh Food Policy Council, just ways to get involved with the food system and advocacy at the various levels. Unfortunately, we're out of time, so I'm gonna wrap this up. I think this was a great conversation, a great continuation of the conversation that we've been having. Thank all four of you so much for being here and sharing your perspective with us. As I mentioned, the links on the screen right now, we will include those links in when we email out the recording of today's session. Also, you can see Food 21's website where you can access all the sessions from the series. And then finally, please join us February 18th for session 5 of the series, Building a Resilient Food Culture. The last session will be on building a viable local food economy. So with that, just thank everyone for tuning in today, and hope everyone has a wonderful day.
Great. Thanks, everybody.
So much.
Thank you.